Command grabs have become a staple of fighting games, and Smash Ultimate has definitely got a lot of them. Ranging from your standard and iconic command grabs such as Kirby's neutral special or Ganondorf's side special, and your more unique command grabs like Incineroar and Steve's side special. But there's one command grab in Smash that, on the surface level, seems normal, but behind the scenes is one of Smash's most complicated and weird moves. And that move is Robin's down special, Nosferatu. Let's start with a quick explanation of how Nosferatu works on a surface level. Nosferatu is a life-stealing command grab that will heal percent on Robin and deal damage to the opponent based off of the starting percent of each party member. There's 3 big variables of Nosferatu. 1, you heal less if the opponent mashes out. 2, you heal with a damage multiplier of 1.25 if they're facing away from Robin. And 3, you heal more if there's a large percent gap between you and your opponent. More on this later. Here's an example of a front hit Nosferatu, with Robin's initial percent at 150 and the opponent's initial percent at 0. That healed Robin by 37.3%. So by this logic, a back hit Nosferatu should heal roughly 46.6%, right?
Of course not. If this move made sense, I wouldn't be making this video.
In case you're confused by this already, don't worry. It's about to get way worse. Clearly, there's something else going on here. Things aren't as consistent as you'd expect with this move, and there's a good reason for this. So, to explain this, we're going to be creating a complicated function that attempts to explain how the game calculates Robin's healing per each hit of Nosferatu.
That's right, I'm teaching you number theory in this video. Buckle up, because it's time for some...
We're going to be creating a recursive function, and to quickly explain what that is, a recursive function is a function that solves a problem by solving a smaller version of that problem until it reaches a satisfying conclusion. This type of function is being chosen here because Robin's healing scales to the opponent's percent, which means each hit will heal a different amount of percent back. A function that attempts to calculate every hit of Robin's Nosferatu at the same time would not give an accurate number. So, using a recursive function to calculate each hit of Nosferatu individually would bear a significantly more accurate calculation to the total healing. Now, let's start by introducing each factor of this function one by one and breaking down each variable involved. The first factor involved here is the damage. Nosferatu heals a flat half of the damage dealt. It would look something like this. The second big factor involved here is the difference in your percent in comparison to the target's percent. If you have more damage than the opponent after the hit, you would heal a small amount of the difference. The function would now look something like this. R represents Robin's initial percent, and T represents the target's initial percent. The 0.028 here is just an arbitrary multiplier that was chosen. But this introduces a problem where if Robin has lower damage than the target, it deducts from their healing, and can theoretically damage Robin if they're low enough. This obviously would be a bit silly and defeat the purpose of Nosferatu, so the calculation just ignores this part if the target ends up at a higher percent than Robin, which we can represent by breaking it down into 2 formulas like this. We would use the top formula if Robin has more percent than the opponent, and the bottom formula if they have less. Now that the function has been restructured, we can move on to the third factor of which direction the target is facing. If they're facing away from Robin, the healing you get is multiplied by a flat 1.25. Adding this to the function changes it to this. The A here is representing the direction the target is facing. If they're facing towards Robin, then A equals a flat 1. If they're facing away from Robin, then A would be a flat 1.25. Depending on if you're using the top or bottom formula, after calculating the contents of the parentheses and addition portions, PEMDAS, it would then be multiplied by A, or A times D for the bottom formula. Finally, the last notable factor is the target's mashing. Since Nosferatu's healing is given per each hit, breaking out early reduces the number of hits, and therefore the amount of healing. The intuitive solution you'd expect for the total healing from Nosferatu with any given number of hits would look something like Fn equals N times H, where N is representing the amount of hits from Nosferatu, and H would once again be calculated by using either the top or bottom formula here depending on the scenario. Now, using this logic, if they were to break out after half of the hits, we'd expect half the healing, right?
Of course not.
There's clearly more happening here. We now know how H is calculated, but we've only been looking at one variable of a much bigger function. So, let's zoom out and build the full function that calculates Robin's total healing step by step, starting off with the ending calculation. Next, we'd add the healing calculation. What this basically means is, the healing for N hits of Nosferatu with the starting percents of both Robin and the target is equal to the healing of the N times H hit of Nosferatu, plus the N minus 1 hits that follow it. And this is where choosing to make this a recursive function would come into play. Robin's healing scales to the opponent's percent, which means each hit will heal slightly less than the last as Robin's percent lowers and the target's percent rises. The percents change between each hit, which means one single calculation would not yield accurate results. Using a recursive function to solve smaller parameters of itself and working down to calculate each hit individually would give you the most precise answer. This and Nosferatu scaling are pretty much the entire reason why this is even so complicated to begin with. If the healing was consistent per each hit, things would be much simpler to understand.
But this is Smash we're talking about. Nothing makes sense.
But on that note, this brings us to the full function used to calculate Nosferatu's total healing. And just in case it needs to be said, it really does work. This would be quite a lot of work to calculate by hand, but that's what technology is for. In the description, you'll find a Google spreadsheet that automatically calculates the total healing after you punch in the necessary information, so you don't have to. Just make a copy of your own and try it for yourself. I want to give a shout out to fellow Robin player B for teaching me number theory, creating the spreadsheet, and helping to create this function. Definitely could not have done this type of video without some help. Big shout out to my first ever Patreon member as well. Thank you so much for supporting myself and the channel. Becoming a member gets you rewards like early access on videos, behind the scenes looks at projects, and more to come. If you're interested and want to check it out, the link to my Patreon is in the description below. I wasn't kidding when I said Nosferatu is one of Smash's most complicated moves. This thing's got a lot going on under the hood, and you'd never notice in an actual match. Will this change how you think about the move when you use it?
No, this is completely pointless information.
But as pointless as it is, it's still pretty cool. Thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Bye bye.